All right, so now we're going to do a deep dive into pre-recruiting preparation. So school choice is something that I really wish, I don't want to spend too much time on, but I wish some people had mentioned to me the importance of school choice in relation to investment banking recruiting. Because if you go on the GMAT Club forums, people talk about the prestige of schools and the money you can get at certain schools, but people don't really talk about how different schools will position you for success in different industries. And so, within the scope of investment banking, I think there are three criteria that also matter that you should think about as you're applying to MBA programs and choosing one. The first is location. And so I'm going to break location out into three categories. First is, are you in New York City? Are you within a 5 or 6 hour drive of New York City? And would you have to fly to New York City? So if you are in New York City, the expectation is that you are going to meet one-on-one with bankers throughout the week. So if you go to Columbia or NYU, right, for example, you'll be scheduling coffee chats with bankers, and you'll be doing it pretty often during the informational interview session. So that's pretty time-consuming, but it's not too bad because you basically just take the subway down and come back, and it's an hour and a half of your day. If you go to school within a 5 hour drive or 6 hour drive, right, so this is the Tucks, then the Sloans, this is the Cornells and the Yales, you're expected to go to New York once a week during the recruiting process. And that can be pretty time consuming, right? You spend a 5 hour drive there and 5 hour drive back basically every week during your fall quarter, or fall semester. And again, you're going to be when you're in New York, you're scheduling informationals with the investment bankers, in person and one-on-one. And then finally, if you're within flying distance, the expectation is not that you'll take a flight every week, but that you'll schedule kind of one-on-one 30-minute phone calls, and that in a way could be more efficient. So I went to school in Chicago, and I didn't actually have to make the trek to New York every week, although I did wind up going twice in person outside of the recruiting process. To meet with bankers. Okay, so industry focus. This is another thing to think about. There are certain schools that are known for finance and known for banking. So NYU, Columbia, and Booth and Wharton, right, are schools that are going to have very strong alumni networks in finance and investment banking. So that when you actually go into investment bank, there's a stronger support network at the bank. Whereas if you go to a school like Kellogg, which is a school I went to, which is more known for marketing and consulting, the network is considerably smaller, and you'll have a smaller but maybe more close-knit, I like to think, network at the firm you're going to. And then finally, I think it's really important, and I'm going to talk about this a little bit more, but when you go to networking events, there's a ratio of students to bankers, and it's always greater than one. And if the goal of these recruiting events is to develop personal relations with bankers, and there's 10 students to every banker, it's very difficult to make those connections. So the ratio of student interest to jobs available actually differs very widely across schools. And for example, at Kellogg, actually it was quite low, and so I was able to get more personal information and personal interaction with the different bankers that I met during the process. And so in a way, it was a little bit easier, I think, for me to actually get that job. Ultimately, of course, school choice is a very personal decision, but I just want to highlight these three criteria: location, industry focus, and the ratio of student interest to jobs available, because I think it's something that's not really talked about, for people who are actually deciding what school to go to in order to get that job in investment banking. Okay, so now we're going to talk about narrowing your scope. There are different ways you can narrow your scope, but it's something that's really important to do. Investment banking is actually a very wide industry that you can go into, and so if you apply to every single role at every single investment bank, you're going to be very, very overwhelmed. You're going to be meeting hundreds of people and expected to develop close relationships with all of them. And I think it's very, very difficult to do that. So to the extent that you can reduce the number of firms you want to apply to, you can target specific industry groups or product groups within a bank. It'll help you twofold. First, it'll reduce the number of people that you have to remember and get to know as people. And then secondly, it'll increase the people that you talk to. It'll increase their interest in you, because instead of you just being somebody who's another person who's applying to their bank, you're somebody who might one day work for that banker who you're talking to. And so they're just more self-interested in pulling you in. And so, for example, to kind of give you a sense, I was recruiting. I decided to limit my search to bulge bracket companies, and I wanted to recruit for the financial institutions industry group. And so, maybe when my peers at networking events were going and talking to everybody that they could, I literally just went to the one FIG banker, and they came to the recruiting events, and I said, hey, I'm interested in FIG. I'd love to talk offline with you, and that was my way into every single bank, because the banker kind of immediately asked, oh, what's your background? Why are you interested in working in the same group that I'm interested in? And we had that initial kind of connection, whereas, maybe when I talked to a banker who didn't work in FIG, it was a little bit more difficult to find something in common that we had to talk about. Okay, so going on, second-year students, I just wanted to take a minute to talk about them because they are one of the most valuable resources that you can have. And I think the earlier you reach out to them when you get on campus, the better off you'll be. So second-year students are the only people who have been through the exact process that you're going through within the last year. And you can imagine that even across, within an investment bank, there's a huge difference between what one school team will do versus another school team. So of course there's certain similarities, but each school team will have its own captain. Each school team will may or may not have a different MBA recruiter from HR helping out. And so the things that each team looks for is slightly different. And it doesn't matter whether you talk to a coach or an HR executive, they're going to only speak in generalities, whereas the second-year students are going to be able to help you out and tell you exactly what they went through the year before. So what I recommend is when you get to campus, within a week or two, reach out to, based on the list that you've determined when you're narrowing your scope of banks that you're targeting, find out which second-year students interviewed and worked at those banks the previous summer, and find one second year from each bank and reach out to them and have coffee with them. Find out, what is the process that they went through at that bank. Is it a high-touch bank versus a low-touch bank? Some banks want you to meet dozens of bankers from their bank, whereas other banks say, don't talk to more than 2 people. Who are the people actually at that bank who are the key decision makers? Not everybody is created equal, and certain people have more sway than others do in the process. And then also, is it a bank that has first and second rounds on the same day? In which case, they probably decide from the networking process who they want to hire before the actual interview takes place. Or are they a bank that has second rounds off campus, and it's kind of more of a traditional super day? In addition, you can look into what makes that. You can ask the second year what makes that bank unique, or what do they think it is that makes them unique? Because during the interview process, what you're going to be asked a lot is where does our bank stand, with you among the different banks that you're applying for, and to the extent you can say, I like your bank because of X, Y, and Z, it really shows that you've done your research, and again, this is that dedication to knowing your customer, which at this point is really the banker that's interviewing you. And then I think the last component that second-year students can really help you with is mock interviews. When January comes around, you're going to want to do lots of mock interviews. And again, the best people to help you with that are the second years because they just had those exact interviews at those exact banks with those exact people the year before. And a lot of people just recycle questions year after year after year. And so to the extent that you've already built those relationships, you're not just reaching out to them for the first time in January, but you had coffee with them a couple of times over the course of the semester, they're going to be much more interested in your well-being and your success come January than if you were to reach out to them for the first time then.